One game, 2 hours. Hook me. Detroit. Become human. I feel it's important to disclose my bias once again. I've always been very intrigued by the concept of humanity. What makes a human human? What separates humans from machines or androids? Games like Nier Automata or Lucy, the Eternity She Wished For are ones that I thoroughly enjoyed and highly recommend. So by tackling this very topic, Detroit Become Human already had kind of a head start. Also, please note that there will be spoilers for the first 2 hours of the game. And with that being said, let's dive right into it. As always in this series, I knew barely anything prior to starting the game. I knew that it was a big deal on consoles and that apparently choices mattered, but I've heard that premise 100 times before. And unfortunately, most of the time, this wasn't actually the case. So I was eager to see if the claims were to ring true in this case. So the game had a very intriguing way of starting out. There was no long exposition, no fluff. I was just told that there was a deviant, which is basically an android that has gone rogue, that had taken a little human girl as a hostage and was threatening to kill her and himself by basically jumping off a rooftop if his demands weren't met. And so the game had me assume the role of the android Connor, who is sent in as a negotiator in this very situation. No dry storytelling, but immediately high-stakes action. What a great way to start out. This is also where the first choices were thrown at me. Because after the initial briefing, the game provides you with a probability of success if you were to tackle the task given to you immediately. In this case, that was negotiating with the deviant. But of course, without any additional information, that probability isn't too high, so you're better off investigating a little bit first. And speaking of investigating, let's talk about that process real quick. Because in and of itself, it isn't anything revolutionary. For the most part, it's just you moving the mouse around until you find a certain clue that you can inspect. But it's the flavor text alongside these clues, and how in the end they sort of come together like a little puzzle, and you manage to reconstruct what had happened. So there will often be a description of what inner organs exactly have been damaged. And then your android will calculate how that happened. And while you're reconstructing the whole crime, you might find additional clues within that recreation. It's not incredibly unique, but altogether it works really well. But let's get back to the task at hand. After all, there is a hostage situation going on. What Detroit Become Human does really well in my opinion is it manages to create a sense of urgency without annoying the player. Because yes, the longer you wait, the lower your chances of success will become, but the game doesn't constantly throw this in your face. Rather, it uses the environment and the people around you to give you that sense of urgency. For example, in my case, while I was investigating the clues, one member of the Special Forces got shot. And I'm fairly certain that this wasn't a scripted event. I'm pretty sure I could have avoided this had I confronted the deviant earlier. That isn't to say that there aren't situations that are actually stressful where the music will pick up and you're being chased or something along the likes. But in my opinion, it's always important to use these moments sparingly. Because if I, as the player, am constantly feeling stressed out, I'm not gonna have a good time. But if these stressful situations are used in moderation, it amplifies their effect. And I feel in my first 2 to 3 hours of play, that has been done really well. While looking for more information in order to increase the probability of success when negotiating, I was confronted with yet more choices. For example, when inspecting an officer's corpse, I found his weapon and was given the choice whether to take that weapon or just let it lie around. And this all played a part during the final confrontation. Speaking of which, let's take a quick look at how that turned out in my case.
I don't want to die. You're not going to die. We're just going to talk. Nothing will happen to you. You have my word. Okay. I trust you. You lied to me, Connor. You lied to me.
As you can see, this was just one of 5 possible outcomes for this particular mission. And of course it's easy to say, oh, it's just the first mission, it merely wants to give you the impression that there's a lot of branching paths. But in my first few hours of play, the flowcharts didn't really become any smaller. Quite the opposite, in fact. They became larger and larger, and there were a lot of branching paths that stayed apart. So really, if just a fraction of all of these choices have an actual impact, there's already a huge replay value here. Anyways, after this first high-stakes mission, the game threw me somewhat of a curveball. Because next I assumed the role of the android Kara, and from trying to save lives and negotiating with a hostage taker, I was suddenly thrown into doing the dishes and cleaning the house. But of course, I very soon found out that this particular storyline wasn't quite so simple either.
You shouldn't mess around with my stuff. It makes me nervous.
I'm sorry, Todd.
You just stay the fuck out of my business. Unless you want to piss me off. You want to piss me off?
No, Todd.
Another aspect that needs to be highlighted is that your actions also affect your relationship with other people in this world, and even the public opinion of androids in general. That of course also increases the amount of choices and possible outcomes, because you can either have good or bad relationships with different characters. I mean, hey, if you want, you can choose to be a complete dick and have everybody hate you. That's a checkmark for a second playthrough. It seems like throughout the game you'll be taking control of 3 different androids, and similar to games like, for example, Heavy Rain, the character stories are intertwined and they're often actively working against each other. Which of course creates a very intriguing dynamic, because you want to do well with all characters, but by doing well with all characters, you're paradoxically actually not doing well with all of them. And also, deliberately messing up with one character in order to help another one is a real consideration to make. As you can probably tell, the cinematography in this whole thing is insanely good. I feel the term interactive movie is being thrown around a lot these days, especially with heavily narrative-driven games. But in this case, the term is very much spot on. On that note, I think I should take a quick second to talk about the graphics. Overall, graphically it's pretty impressive. The important aspects for a game like this, that being the character models, animations, and especially facial expressions, are incredibly well done. I'd struggle to come up with another game where the facial animations manage to convey emotion so spot on without feeling uncanny, which happens a lot in these photorealistic games. Of course, if your graphic style is more stylized, you can take a lot of freedoms with facial expressions, but in a game like this, that isn't the case. Even messing up tiny details with muscle movement or the eyes will create an unnatural feeling. And that just doesn't happen here. So character models, facial animations, absolutely top notch. If you do take the time to check the texture work more closely in especially the outside areas, it doesn't look that amazing. But that is barely the focus of this game, and as I said, the important things look absolutely stellar. And so, did Detroit Become Human get me hooked? Well, to no one's surprise, yes, of course it did. It had me in pretty much the first 10 minutes. By now I've put quite a few hours into it, I assume I am a little over halfway through the game, and I'm already eager to go back and do things differently and see how that changes the story. So if the topic interests you or if you think this might be up your alley, then so far I would very highly recommend it. And finally, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like. If you didn't, that's what the dislike button's there for. And as always, this is Evolutionz signing out, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next one.